What happens when a simple human word breaks a 1,000-year-old galactic hierarchy? When Captain Sarah Chen accidentally called the most feared alien ruler in the galaxy boss instead of your imperial magnificence, she didn't just commit a diplomatic blunder, she triggered a chain of events that would reshape the entire cosmic order. The Zephyrian Queen, whose very name made star systems tremble, did something no one expected. She laughed. Not the cruel laughter of a tyrant, but genuine amusement that echoed through her crystalline throne room. In that moment, humanity went from being an ignored backwater species to the most interesting civilization the galaxy had seen in millennia. Now Sarah finds herself thrust into a role she never wanted: Galactic Envoy for Humanity. Armed with nothing but her quick wit, stubborn determination, and an alien queen who apparently enjoys being called boss, she must navigate the treacherous waters of interstellar politics while uncovering a conspiracy that threatens to destroy everything both species hold dear. This is the story of how one human's casual disrespect became the foundation of a new galactic alliance, and how sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is simply treating everyone like equals, even when they tower over you with multiple arms and can crush starships with their minds. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the crystal corridors of the Zephyrian flagship, trying to process what had just happened. 3 hours ago, she was preparing for what everyone expected to be humanity's final diplomatic meeting before being relegated to permanent observer status in the Galactic Council. Now she was apparently the newly appointed Galactic Envoy for Earth, and the most powerful alien ruler in known space wanted to have coffee with her. This has to be some kind of elaborate joke, Sarah muttered to herself, adjusting her dress uniform for the 5th time. The corridors around her hummed with an energy that made her teeth ache, the walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to her emotional state. Right now, they were flashing an alarming shade of orange that she suspected meant either extreme confusion or impending doom. The Zephyrian escort walking beside her, a being that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a walking tree, clicked its mandibles in what she'd learned was amusement. Ambassador Chen, your stress patterns are quite entertaining. The walls are particularly fond of the way your cortisol levels spike when you think about the magnitude of your new position. Great, Sarah replied dryly. Even the architecture is judging me now. She paused, looking at her escort more carefully. And it's just captain. I haven't actually accepted any ambassador position yet. The mantis tree being, who had introduced himself as Facilitator Crickstall, tilted his elongated head. But you called the queen boss. In our culture, such casual address indicates either supreme confidence in one's position or, he paused dramatically, acceptance of a role as trusted advisor. The queen is chosen to interpret it as the latter. Sarah groaned interminable. The infamous incident had happened so naturally she barely remembered the exact moment. After sitting through 6 hours of increasingly ridiculous protocol violations and diplomatic nonsense, when Queen Zyra Kai had asked her opinion on humanity's potential contribution to galactic civilization, Sarah had simply shrugged and said, "Look, boss, humans are good at 3 things: adapting, being stubborn, and finding creative solutions when everyone else says something's impossible." The throne room had gone dead silent. Even the Queen's personal guard beings that looked like they could bench press a small moon had stopped breathing. Sarah had immediately realized her mistake, but before she could apologize, Queen Zyra Kai had done something unprecedented. She had laughed until tears streamed down her metallic cheeks. "Fascinating," the Queen had said between gasps. "In 12 centuries of rule, no one has ever called me boss. I find I rather like it." Now, walking through corridors that probably cost more than Earth's entire GDP, Sarah wondered if she'd accidentally stumbled into the biggest diplomatic success in human history. Possibly both. "Tell me about this coffee thing," Sarah said to Crickstall as they approached what appeared to be a more casual section of the ship. The walls here were warmer, with softer curves and what looked suspiciously like actual windows showing the starfield outside. The Queen mentioned wanting to have coffee and talk. Is that normal? Crickstall's mandibles clicked rapidly. Define normal. Queen Zyra Kai has ruled the Zephyrian Empire for over 1,000 years. In that time, she has never invited any foreign diplomat for an informal meeting. She has never expressed interest in consuming recreational beverages from other cultures, and she has definitely never asked anyone to drop the formal crap and just talk like people. Sarah winced. She definitely remembered saying that, though she'd been addressing one of the minor functionaries who kept interrupting with protocol reminders. So I broke about 50 different diplomatic laws, insulted the most powerful person in the galaxy, and now she wants to be friends? Essentially, yes. It's either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. Crickstow stopped at an elaborate door that spiraled open like a flower blooming in fast forward. The Queen is waiting. The room beyond was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of the crystal and grandeur of the throne room, this space felt almost cozy. The ceiling showed a holographic view of what appeared to be sunset on some alien world, complete with 2 purple moons and rings of floating islands. Comfortable-looking furniture was arranged around a low table, and the air carried the scent of something that reminded Sarah of jasmine mixed with ozone. Queen Zyrakai stood with her back to the door, looking out at the real starfield through a massive window. Without the ceremonial armor and crown, she was still imposing, nearly 8 feet tall with 4 graceful arms and skin that seemed to be made of living silver, but somehow more approachable. "Your Majesty," Sarah began, then caught herself. "Boss?" The Queen turned, and Sarah was struck again by how alien yet expressive her face was. The large eyes that took up nearly a third of her elongated head were currently showing what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement, and the delicate patterns etched into her silver skin were pulsing with warm colors. "Much better," Queen Zyrakai said, gesturing to the seating area with 2 of her arms while the other 2 moved to pour something from an elegant container. "I took the liberty of having my food specialists create something approximating your Earth coffee. I understand it's essential for human diplomatic functions." Sarah couldn't help but grin as she settled into what turned out to be the most comfortable chair she'd ever experienced. You could say that. Though I should probably mention that most of my diplomatic experience comes from negotiating mining rights disputes and trying to convince asteroid prospectors not to shoot each other.
"Excellent," the Queen said, handing Sarah a cup that was warm and smelled surprisingly like actual coffee.
"That means you haven't been ruined by formal diplomatic training. I've been dealing with properly trained diplomats for centuries. They're extraordinarily boring." Sarah took a sip of the coffee-like substance and was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't exactly coffee, but it was warm, slightly bitter, and had a caffeine-like effect that made her feel more alert. "This is really good, thank you." The Queen settled into her own chair, which adjusted automatically to accommodate her extra arms and height. "Now, Captain Chen, let's discuss why I'm about to make you the most important human in the galaxy, whether you want the job or not." "I'm listening," Sarah said, though part of her was still trying to process the surreal nature of having casual coffee with someone who commanded fleets that could sterilize planets. Queen Zyrakai leaned forward, her expression growing serious. "What do you know about the current state of galactic politics?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "The basics. The Galactic Council has been dominated by the same 5 major civilizations for about 20,000 years. Humanity is considered a minor species because we've only been spacefaring for about 2 centuries, and most of our expansion has been focused on resource extraction rather than conquest. The general attitude seems to be that we're useful for manual labor but not much else."
"A reasonable summary, but it misses the most important point," the Queen said.
"The galaxy is stagnating. The major civilizations have become so focused on maintaining their positions and following ancient protocols that actual progress has nearly stopped. Do you know when the last significant technological advancement was shared among Council species?" Sarah shook her head. 732 years ago, the development of quantum fold communications. Before that, it was over a millennium. The Queen's skin patterns shifted to cooler blues and purples. "We've become a civilization of bureaucrats and tradition keepers. We've forgotten how to innovate, how to take risks, how to grow. And you think humans can change that?" "I know they can," Queen Zyrakai said firmly. "Captain Chen, in the 2 centuries since humans achieved spaceflight, your species has colonized 17 star systems, developed 3 entirely new forms of faster-than-light travel, created artificial gravity systems that are 30% more efficient than our best technology, and somehow managed to make asteroid mining profitable. Most impressively, you've done all of this while maintaining your cultural diversity and individual creativity. I didn't realize other species had trouble with innovation. I mean, you guys have technology that makes our best stuff look like stone tools. We have old technology, the Queen corrected. Most of what you see was developed thousands of years ago and has been refined but never truly revolutionized. Your species approaches problems differently. Where we see impossibilities, you see interesting challenges. Where we see established protocols, you see suggestions. The Queen stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars. 3 days ago, one of your mining ships encountered a Kethler raiding party near the Proxima Relay. Do you know what happened? Sarah grimaced. The Kethler were notorious pirates who preyed on commercial shipping. They were also significantly better armed than most human vessels. The mining ship got away somehow? Better than that. Captain Rodriguez of the mining vessel Stubborn Mule convinced the Kethlar raiders to help him extract rare metals from an unstable asteroid in exchange for 40% of the profits. The operation was so successful that the Kethlar have requested permission to establish a permanent trade relationship with human mining operations. Sarah stared at the Queen. That's actually pretty typical for our miners. They'll negotiate with anyone if there's profit involved. Exactly. Queen Zyrakai turned back to face her, all 4 arms gesturing emphatically. For over 2,000 years, the established response to Kethler raiders has been either to fight them or avoid them. No one ever thought to offer them a business partnership. It's brilliant, practical, and completely outside conventional thinking. Sarah was beginning to understand where this conversation was heading, and she wasn't sure she liked it. Boss, you're not seriously thinking of making humanity some kind of galactic problem solvers, are you?
That's exactly what I'm thinking, the Queen said, returning to her seat.
The galaxy needs fresh perspectives, Captain. It needs species that haven't been locked into the same patterns of thought for millennia. Humanity could be the catalyst for a new age of innovation and growth. Or we could accidentally start a galactic war by suggesting the wrong business partnership to the wrong species, Sarah pointed out. Queen Zyrakai's patterns shifted to what Sarah was learning indicated amusement. There's always that risk. But consider the alternative. Continued stagnation while the galaxy slowly declines into irrelevance. At least with humans involved, things will be interesting. Sarah took another sip of her not-quite coffee and tried to process everything. What exactly are you proposing? I want to sponsor humanity's elevation to full council status, with you as their primary representative. More than that, I want to create a new position, Galactic Innovation Coordinator, with authority to identify problems that have been considered unsolvable and recruit creative minds from across the galaxy to work on solutions. The scope of what the Queen was suggesting hit Sarah like a physical blow. You want to make me responsible for solving the galaxy's problems? I want to give you the resources and authority to help other people solve the galaxy's problems, the Queen corrected. There's a significant difference. You won't be working alone, Captain. You'll have access to the best minds and technologies from hundreds of different species. Your job would be to coordinate efforts, break down communication barriers, and apply human-style creative thinking to challenges that have stumped us for centuries. Sarah set down her cup and looked directly at the Queen. Why me? I mean, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm just a mining captain. There are people in the human diplomatic corps who actually know what they're doing. Because you called me boss? Queen Zyrakai said simply. Because when faced with 6 hours of meaningless protocol, you got frustrated and spoke honestly. Because when you see a problem, your first instinct is to find a practical solution rather than to determine who has the authority to make decisions. Most importantly, because you don't think like a diplomat. The Queen leaned forward, her expression intense. Captain Chen, the galaxy doesn't need another diplomat. It has thousands of those, and they've spent centuries accomplishing nothing of significance. The galaxy needs someone who can look at a situation, ignore the established ways of doing things, and ask, what if we tried something completely different? Sarah felt a familiar sensation in her stomach, the same feeling she got when she was about to make a decision that would either pay off spectacularly or blow up in her face. Usually, she got this feeling right before attempting some supposedly impossible mining operation or trying to negotiate with hostile aliens. "What kind of problems are we talking about?" she asked. "To start with, the hegemony has been trying to terraform the Kepler system for over 600 years. The planets keep rejecting all attempts at atmospheric modification. The Christine Collective has been unable to develop faster-than-light communications that work through quantum foam. The trade routes through the Vega sector have been considered too dangerous to use for 3 centuries due to spatial anomalies that destroy ships. And you think humans might have ideas about solving those problems? I think humans might have ideas that no one else has thought of," the Queen corrected. "Whether those ideas will work is what we'll find out." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth with its 5 billion people who had no idea their mining captain was sitting in an alien queen's private quarters discussing the future of galactic civilization. "If I say yes to this," she said finally, "what happens to Earth? To humanity in general? Humanity becomes a full member of the Galactic Council with all the rights and protections that entails." Queen Zirakai replied, "Your species will have access to advanced technologies, established trade routes, and diplomatic protection. More importantly, humans will be free to spread throughout the galaxy and establish colonies wherever they choose with council backing. And if I say no?" The Queen's expression didn't change, but her skin patterns shifted to neutral colors. "Then humanity remains at observer status and the galaxy continues its slow decline into irrelevance. I would still respect your species and ensure you're treated fairly, but this opportunity won't come again." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd suspected as much. This wasn't really a choice, it was a chance to grab the brass ring or watch it disappear forever. "How long do I have to decide?" "You've already decided," Queen Zirakai said with certainty. "You decided the moment you asked what kind of problems we were dealing with instead of making excuses about why you couldn't handle the job." Sarah laughed despite herself. "You know, boss, I think you might be right." She stood up and extended her hand. "I accept the position, whatever it actually turns out to involve." The Queen looked at the offered hand for a moment, then reached out with one of her own arms to grasp it. Her skin was surprisingly warm and had a texture like polished metal. "Welcome to galactic politics, Captain Shen. Try not to accidentally start any wars." "No promises," Sarah replied with a grin, "but I'll do my best to keep the collateral damage to a minimum." As they shook hands, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what she'd just gotten herself into. On the other hand, she'd spent her entire career taking on challenges that everyone else said were impossible. How different could interstellar diplomacy be? She had a feeling she was about to find out. Sarah's first day as Galactic Innovation Coordinator began with what she would later describe as controlled chaos with a side of existential crisis. Complete with access to the galaxy's most comprehensive databases, communication systems that could reach any civilized world, and an assistant who apparently didn't sleep. "Ambassador Chen," said the assistant, a being called Nexus who looked like a cross between a dolphin and a computer terminal, "you have 47 priority requests for assistance, 12 formal challenges to your authority, and 1 death threat. How would you like to prioritize your schedule?" Sarah looked up from the steaming cup of actual Earth coffee that had somehow been delivered to her new office. The room was smaller than the Queen's private quarters, but still larger than her entire ship back home, with walls that displayed constantly updating information streams from across the galaxy. "Let's start with a death threat," she said. "I figure it's best to get the worst news out of the way first." Nexus's screen face flickered with what might have been amusement. "The threat comes from Ambassador Zeth Kali of the Rigel Confederation. He believes your appointment violates 17 different council protocols and represents an insult to proper galactic order. He challenges you to formal combat to determine the legitimacy of your position." "Combat?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of combat? Traditional Rigel death combat involves two participants attempting to kill each other with energy weapons while suspended over a pit of acid, Nexus explained helpfully. It's considered quite honorable if you survive, less so if you don't. Sarah sipped her coffee thoughtfully. What happens if I decline? You would be considered a coward by Rigel standards, which would significantly damage your credibility with approximately 15% of council species. However, you would remain alive, which most species consider advantageous. Right, Sarah said. What happens if I suggest an alternative form of competition? Nexus paused, processing. That would depend on whether Ambassador Zefkali finds the alternative acceptable. What did you have in mind? Sarah grinned. Let's challenge him to solve one of those impossible problems the Queen mentioned. If he can terraform a planet faster than a human team, I'll resign. If we succeed where his people have failed, he acknowledges my authority. That is highly irregular, Nexus said slowly. But it does not violate any existing protocols since no one has ever proposed such a challenge before. Perfect. Send him the offer. Now, what about those priority requests? Nexus's screen shifted to display a list of problems that made Sarah's head spin. The most urgent comes from the Tau Ceti system. They have a plague affecting their crystalline life forms that has resisted all conventional treatments. The second priority is from the Vegan Trade Alliance. Their entire economic system is collapsing due to pirates using some kind of new cloaking technology. The third, wait, Sarah interrupted. How am I supposed to solve a plague? I'm not a doctor. You're not supposed to solve it personally, Nexus explained. You're supposed to coordinate resources and find unconventional approaches that others have not considered. For the plague, the Tau Ceti scientists have tried every known medical treatment. Perhaps the solution isn't medical. Sarah leaned back in her chair, which automatically adjusted to support her perfectly. What do humans do when conventional medicine doesn't work? From my research on human history, you typically try increasingly desperate remedies until something works, often discovering the solution was simpler than expected. What if this plague isn't actually a disease? What if it's something else that just looks like a disease? Sarah stood up and began pacing, a habit that helped her think. Nexus, can you get me detailed information about when and how this plague started? Accessing Tau Ceti medical databases now, Nexus replied. After a moment, holographic displays appeared around the room showing crystalline beings in various stages of what looked like decay. The plague began approximately 6 months ago, shortly after a meteor impact in the Tau Ceti IV polar region. Initial symptoms include loss of harmonic resonance, decreased energy absorption, and eventual crystalline fracturing. Sarah stopped pacing. Meteor impact? Did anyone analyze what was in the meteor? Standard mineral analysis was performed. The meteor contained primarily ice and rocky debris, with trace amounts of rare minerals, nothing considered harmful. But what if the harm isn't from what the meteor contained, but from what it displaced or disturbed? Sarah turned to face Nexus. I need to talk to whoever's in charge of the Tau Ceti investigation, but first, I want you to cross-reference their geological data with any similar meteor impacts in the last 1,000 years. Connecting you to Chief Scientist Rilnath of the Tau Ceti Medical Research Institute now. The holographic display shifted to show a being that looked like a walking geode with crystalline formations protruding from every surface and internal lights that pulsed in complex patterns. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Coordinator Chen, it said, we are grateful for any assistance you can provide. Our people are dying, and we have exhausted all medical options. Chief Scientist, I'm not going to pretend I know anything about crystalline biology, Sarah said honestly. But I do know about mining and geological disturbances. Tell me about the area where the meteor hit. The polar region of Tau Ceti IV has always been stable, primarily ice formations with some mineral deposits. The meteor was not large, perhaps 50 meters in diameter. What's underneath the polar ice? Rilnath's light patterns flickered. Underneath? We have never needed to survey beneath the permanent ice. It has been stable for millions of years. Until 6 months ago when a meteor punched a hole in it, Sarah pointed out. Chief, what if this plague isn't caused by something the meteor brought, but by something it exposed? Something that's been buried under the ice for millions of years. There was a long pause. You suggest that the meteor released something from beneath the surface? I'm suggesting that maybe you're not dealing with a disease at all. Maybe you're dealing with some kind of environmental contamination or exposure to something your people have never encountered before. Sarah began pacing again. On Earth, we've seen similar situations in mining operations. What looks like a disease sometimes turns out to be poisoning from unusual mineral exposures or gas leaks. Rilnath's crystals began pulsing more rapidly. We have not considered geological causes. Our medical scans show no toxic substances in affected individuals. Because you're looking for toxins that would affect biological creatures, Sarah said, but you're crystalline beings. What affects you might be completely different. Nexus, any luck with that historical cross-reference? I have found 3 similar incidents in the past millennium, Nexus reported. In each case, a meteor impact in a polar or permanently frozen region was followed by unusual effects on local populations. However, none of the affected species were crystalline. What kind of effects? Varied. The hegemony reported widespread equipment failures after a polar impact on Kepler 442c. The Andromedan Collective experienced sudden changes in their hive mind communications following an impact on their ice moon. The Centauri Federation reported temporary loss of their telepathic abilities after an ice impact on their homeworld. Sarah felt the familiar thrill of a pattern emerging. All different effects, but all involving some kind of interference with natural abilities or technology. Chief Scientist, I think you need to survey what's under that impact site. I suspect the meteor didn't cause your plague. It just opened a door to something that's been locked away for a very long time. Rilnath's light patterns had shifted to what Sarah hoped was excitement rather than alarm. This would require a complete revision of our research approach. We have been focusing entirely on medical treatment rather than source elimination. Sometimes the best cure is removing the cause, Sarah said. I recommend you send a geological survey team to examine what the meteor exposed. If I'm right, you might find that treating the environment is more effective than treating the patients. We will begin immediately. Coordinator Chen, if your hypothesis proves correct, you will have saved thousands of lives with a single insight. I hope so, Sarah said sincerely. Keep me updated on what you find. The connection closed, and Sarah turned back to Nexus. How did that look for my first attempt at galactic problem solving? Promising, Nexus replied. You have identified a potential solution in 12 minutes that their medical teams did not consider in 6 months. This suggests either exceptional insight or exceptional luck. I'll take either one, Sarah said with a grin. What's next? The Vegan Trade Alliance piracy problem. They report that pirates using advanced cloaking technology have made their primary trade routes impassable. Conventional military response has been ineffective because the pirates cannot be detected until they attack. Sarah nodded. Standard anti-piracy tactics assume you can see the pirates coming. What if you can't detect the ships but you can detect their effects? Explain. Pirates still need to move cargo, communicate with each other, and sell what they steal. They might be invisible, but their operations aren't. Sarah called up the trade route data on her displays. Nexus, I need information about changes in local economies along the affected routes. If these pirates are stealing large amounts of cargo, that merchandise has to be going somewhere. Accessing trade data now, Nexus responded. After a few moments, new displays appeared showing economic fluctuations across the region. I detect several anomalies. 3 systems along the affected routes show unusual increases in the availability of specific goods that match cargo reports from attacked ships. And those systems are Asteroid Mining Stations, Alpha, Centauri, 7, Vega, Minor, 1-2, and the Independent Trading Post Freeport Station. Sarah studied the data. Those all have something in common. They're outside normal council jurisdiction. Perfect places to fence stolen goods. She paused, thinking. What about communication intercepts? The pirates might be cloaked, but they still need to coordinate their attacks. The vegan military has detected no unusual communications because they're looking for obvious military frequencies, but pirates are business people first. Nexus. Cross-reference normal commercial communications in the affected areas with the timing of pirate attacks. Look for patterns in shipping schedules, route changes, or cargo manifests that might indicate someone's passing information to the pirates. Nexus processed for several minutes before responding. I have identified a pattern. Communications from the Vegan Trade Coordination Center show suspicious timing correlations with pirate attacks. Someone with access to shipping schedules appears to be providing advance information to the pirates. An inside job, Sarah nodded. Classic. The cloaking technology is impressive, but it doesn't matter how invisible you are if someone's telling you exactly when and where to attack. She stood up and stretched. Nexus. Contact Admiral Kestel of the Vegan Defense Force. Tell him I think his piracy problem is actually an intelligence leak problem, and I have some suggestions for finding the source. Connecting now. Admiral Kestel appeared as a hologram, looking like a humanoid seahorse wearing an elaborate military uniform. His large eyes focused on Sarah with what she hoped was interest rather than skepticism. Coordinator Chen, we are desperate for any assistance. These cloaked pirates are destroying our economy. Admiral, I don't think your problem is the cloaking technology. I think your problem is that someone in your Trade Coordination Center is telling the pirates exactly when and where to attack. Sarah gestured to the displays showing the data correlations. My assistant found patterns in your communications that match the timing of pirate attacks perfectly. Admiral Kestel's eyes widened. You believe we have a traitor in our own organization? I believe you have someone who's being paid very well for shipping schedules, Sarah corrected. This isn't about ideology, it's about profit. The good news is that's usually easier to solve than true betrayal. How do we identify the source? Sarah smiled. We set a trap. Create fake shipping schedules for valuable cargo on a route you can monitor closely. Share the information only with specific individuals using slightly different details for each person. When the pirates attack, you'll know who leaked the information by which version of the fake schedule they follow. And once we identify the traitor, then you feed them false information to lure the pirates into an ambush, Sarah said. Cloaking technology is impressive, but it doesn't help much when you're flying into a trap. Admiral Kestel's expression had shifted to what looked like admiration. Districting could end our pirate problem within days rather than months. Why did none of our military advisors suggest this approach? Because they were focused on the technology problem instead of the information problem, Sarah replied. Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the right solution. We will implement your suggestions immediately. If this succeeds, the Vegan Trade Alliance will be significantly in your debt. Just doing my job, Admiral. Keep me posted on the results. After the connection closed, Sarah slumped back into her chair. 2 problems down, 45 to go. How am I doing on time? You have been working for 1 hour and 7 minutes, Nexus reported. At this pace, you will complete your current priority list in approximately 22 hours. Right, Sarah said, reaching for her coffee. I think I'm starting to understand why the Queen thought this job needed someone who doesn't think like a diplomat. Your approach is certainly unconventional, Nexus agreed. Most galactic coordinators spend weeks in committee meetings before attempting to address major problems. Committees are great for making everyone feel involved, Sarah said. But sometimes you need to cut through the complexity and look for simple solutions that everyone else missed because they were too obvious. Her communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Sarah opened the connection to find Queen Zirakai looking amused. How is your first day progressing, Coordinator? Well, boss, I think I figured out that most galactic problems aren't actually as complicated as people make them seem. They're just looking at them from the wrong angle. Excellent. I have another challenge for you if you're interested. Sarah grinned. Hit me. The hegemony has been trying to establish a colony on Kepler 142c for over 600 years. Every attempt fails because the planet's ecosystem rejects all terraforming efforts. They've asked for your input. What kind of rejection are we talking about? Introduced plant life dies within days. Atmospheric modifications reverse themselves. Imported soil becomes sterile. The planet seems to actively resist any changes to its environment. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Boss, what if the planet isn't rejecting terraforming? What if it's already terraformed, just not for the hegemony? Queen Zirikai's pattern shifted to bright interest. Explain. 600 years of failed attempts suggest this isn't a matter of finding the right technique. It suggests that something is actively maintaining the planet's current state. Sarah stood up and began pacing again. What if Kepler 442c already has an ecosystem that's protecting itself? What if the hegemony has been trying to terraform a planet that's already inhabited? The planet has been thoroughly surveyed. No intelligent life has been detected, not intelligent life, Sarah said. Intelligent ecosystem. On Earth, we've discovered that some forests function almost like a single organism, with trees communicating through root networks and chemical signals. What if Kepler 442c has evolved something similar on a planetary scale? There was a long pause. That would explain the coordinated resistance to terraforming attempts. It would also mean the hegemony has been trying to commit accidental genocide for 6 centuries, Sarah pointed out. Maybe instead of trying to change the planet, they should try to communicate with it. Queen Zirikai was quiet for several moments. Coordinator Chen, if you are correct, this represents a discovery that could change how we approach planetary colonization throughout the galaxy. Or it could be completely wrong and I'll look like an idiot who thinks planets can talk, Sarah replied cheerfully. But it's worth investigating, right? Indeed it is. I will contact the hegemony and suggest they send a xenobiology team rather than another terraforming expedition. Boss? Sarah said as the Queen prepared to end the communication. Yes? Thanks for giving me this chance. Even if it turns out I'm terrible at it, this is the most interesting job I've ever had. Queen Zirikai's patterns shifted to warm colors. Captain Chen, something tells me you're going to exceed even my expectations. Try not to revolutionize galactic civilization too quickly. Some of us need time to adjust. After the connection closed, Sarah looked at Nexus. Well, that was my first day on the job. What did you think? I think, Nexus replied, that galactic politics just became significantly more interesting. Also, Ambassador Zeth Colley has accepted your challenge. He wishes to know which impossible problem you would like him to attempt. Sarah grinned. Tell him he can choose. After all, they're all supposed to be impossible, right? As she settled in to tackle the next crisis on her list, Sarah couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to get the hang of this galactic coordinator thing. The problems were bigger than anything she'd dealt with before, but the basic approach was the same. Look at the situation from a different angle, ignore what everyone says is impossible, and find the simple solution hiding in plain sight. Of course, she still had 43 more problems to solve before she could call it a day, but at least now she was confident she could handle whatever the galaxy threw at her next. Famous last words, she thought to herself, and got back to work. 3 weeks into her new role as Galactic Innovation Coordinator, Sarah was beginning to suspect that someone was actively sabotaging her successes. It started with small things, delayed responses to her requests, missing data files, communication glitches that somehow only affected her priority cases. She might have dismissed it as the normal bureaucratic friction of a galaxy-spanning government, except that every delay seemed perfectly timed to cause maximum disruption to her problem-solving efforts. Nexus, she said, reviewing the latest batch of suspicious incidents. How many of my successful solutions have been mysteriously reversed or undermined in the past week? Her Dolphin computer assistant's screen flickered with concern. The Tau Ceti plague solution was delayed when their geological survey equipment malfunctioned. The vegan piracy trap was compromised when the false shipping schedules were leaked to the media. The hegemony's attempt to communicate with Kepler 442c was postponed due to administrative oversight. And let me guess, none of these problems affected any other council operations during the same period? Correct. The equipment failures, information leaks, and administrative errors were isolated to projects you were coordinating. Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. In her mining career, she'd learned to recognize the difference between bad luck and deliberate interference. This was definitely the latter. "Someone doesn't want me to succeed," she said aloud. "The question is whether they're opposed to human involvement in galactic affairs or whether they have some other agenda." Before Nexus could respond, Sarah's communication system chimed with an urgent priority signal. The holographic display revealed Admiral Kestel of the Vegan Defense Force, but his usual composed demeanor was replaced by obvious agitation. "Coordinator Chen, we have a serious problem. The pirate trap you suggested has been turned against us. They were expecting our ambush and managed to capture 3 of our patrol ships." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "How is that possible? We only shared the trap details with the verified clean members of your command staff." "That's what we thought too, but somehow the pirates knew exactly where we would be positioned and when we would strike. They had countermeasures prepared for every aspect of our strategy." "Admiral, this wasn't a leak. This was active sabotage by someone with access to real-time operational information." Sarah stood up and began pacing. "Someone wanted my solution to fail spectacularly, and they were willing to sacrifice your ships to make it happen." Admiral Kestel's large eyes widened. "You believe this was a deliberate attempt to discredit your methods?" "I believe this is part of a pattern," Sarah replied grimly. "Too many of my recent successes have encountered convenient failures. Someone is working very hard to make me look incompetent." The communication was interrupted by another priority signal. Queen Zyrakai appeared in a second holographic display, and for the first time since Sarah had met her, the Queen looked genuinely angry. "Coordinator Chen, we need to talk immediately. There have been some disturbing developments." "I'll be right there, boss," Sarah said. Then, to Admiral Kestel, "Admiral, I want you to conduct a complete security review of everyone who had access to our operational plans. Someone in your organization is working for the other side, and I don't think they're just interested in piracy profits." After both communications closed, Sarah turned to Nexus. "I want you to compile a complete analysis of every interference incident we've experienced. Look for patterns in timing, methods, and who would have had the necessary access to cause each disruption." "Processing request now," Nexus replied. "Should I also investigate potential motives for wanting to discredit your position?" "Definitely. And Nexus? Start backing up all our data to secure isolated storage. If someone's trying to sabotage my work, they might escalate to destroying evidence." The walk to Queen Zyrakai's private quarters felt longer than usual, partly because Sarah's mind was racing through possible explanations for the recent problems, and partly because she noticed several Zephyrian crew members watching her with expressions that seemed less friendly than usual. By the time she reached the Queen's door, she was convinced that whatever news awaited her would not be good. Queen Zyrakai was standing at her window again, but this time her posture radiated tension rather than contemplation. Her skin patterns were cycling through dark colors that Sarah had learned indicated serious displeasure. "Boss," Sarah said carefully, "what's happened?" The Queen turned, and Sarah was struck by how weary she looked. "Captain Chen, there has been a formal motion filed with the Galactic Council challenging not only your authority as Innovation Coordinator, but humanity's entire membership in the Council." Sarah felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "On what grounds?" "Incompetence, criminal negligence, and violation of established protocols," Queen Zyrakai said bitterly. "The motion cites the vegan military disaster, the delayed Tau Ceti medical response, and the hegemony colonization postponement as evidence that human involvement in galactic affairs poses a threat to established civilizations." "But those weren't failures of competence," Sarah protested. "Those were deliberate sabotage." "I believe you," the Queen said firmly, "but proving sabotage is significantly more difficult than proving failure. The Council motion has already gained support from 12 major civilizations, including some that I had considered allies." Sarah slumped into the nearest chair. How bad is this? If the motion passes, humanity will be expelled from the Council and forbidden from participating in galactic civilization. Your species would be confined to your current systems and prohibited from further expansion or technological exchange. The scope of the disaster hit Sarah like a physical blow. Not only would she lose her position, but the entire human species would be cut off from the galaxy. All because someone had successfully made it look like she was incompetent. Who filed the motion? She asked. Officially, Ambassador Zefkali of the Rigel Confederation. However, the motion is co-sponsored by representatives from the Andromedan Collective, the Centauri Federation, and the Trade Guilds Alliance. Sarah looked up sharply. Boss, that's interesting. Those are all civilizations that have been mentioned in my recent cases. The Andromedans had the hive mind communication problems after the meteor impact. The Centauri Federation lost their telepathic abilities after a similar incident, and the trade guilds would be affected by any solution to the vegan piracy problem. Queen Zyrakai's patterns shifted slightly toward brighter colors. You think there's a connection? I think someone has been very carefully orchestrating this entire situation, Sarah said, her mind beginning to put pieces together. What if the goal isn't just to discredit me, but to prevent any solutions to these specific problems? What if someone benefits from keeping these situations unresolved? The Queen moved to the seating area and settled into her chair. Explain your reasoning. Sarah stood up and began pacing, a habit that helped her think through complex problems. Look at the pattern, boss. Every problem I've been asked to solve represents a situation that benefits someone if it remains unsolved. The plague on Tau Ceti IV is forcing them to import medical supplies and technology. The vegan piracy problem is disrupting trade routes and creating artificial scarcity. The hegemony colonization failures are preventing them from accessing valuable resources. You suggest that someone is profiting from these crises? I suggest that someone has been creating and maintaining these crises for their own benefit, Sarah said. And when I started finding solutions, they decided to eliminate the threat by discrediting both me and humanity as a whole. Queen Zirakai was quiet for several moments, processing the implications. If you're correct, this represents a conspiracy that spans multiple star systems and involves some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, which would explain how they've been able to sabotage my operations so effectively, Sarah pointed out. They have access to communication networks, administrative systems, and intelligence operations across multiple species. It would also mean that the threat to humanity is just a side effect of a much larger plot to maintain control over galactic commerce and politics. The question is, how do we prove it? Before the Queen could respond, Sarah's communication device chimed with an urgent message from Nexus. She opened the connection to find her assistant's screen flickering with excitement. Coordinator Chen, I have completed the analysis you requested. The pattern is even more significant than we suspected. What did you find? Every interference incident can be traced to a single source, the Galactic Commerce Regulation Authority. They have had administrative oversight or information access for every sabotaged project. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Nexus, what exactly does the Commerce Regulation Authority do? They oversee trade standards, resource allocation, and economic stability measures throughout the galaxy. They also have unprecedented access to communication networks, transportation schedules, and administrative systems across all member civilizations. Queen Zirakai had gone very still. The GCRA is run by Director Morvain of the Centauri Federation. He's been in that position for over 3 centuries. And the Centauri Federation is one of the civilizations backing the motion to expel humanity, Sarah added. Boss, I think we've found our conspiracy. But why would Director Morvain want to prevent solutions to galactic problems? The Queen asked. Sarah's mind was racing through the implications. Because every problem I've been solving would reduce dependence on the systems his authority controls. If the Tau Ceti plague is environmental rather than medical, they don't need to import expensive treatments through GCRA-regulated channels. If the vegan piracy problem is intelligence-based rather than technology-based, they don't need GCRA-approved security solutions. If the hegemony colonization issues are ecological rather than technical, they don't need GCRA-certified terraforming resources. Director Morvain has been maintaining artificial scarcity to justify his authority and profit from the solutions, Queen Zirakai said, her pattern shifting to dangerous reds and golds. And when you started providing simple, cost-effective alternatives, he decided to eliminate the threat.
The question is,
how do we prove it without getting humanity expelled from the galaxy in the process? Queen Zirakai stood up, her expression resolving into something that reminded Sarah why this being was considered one of the most formidable rulers in the galaxy. Captain Chen, how quickly can you solve all of those sabotaged problems simultaneously? If I can get access to the resources I need and protection from further interference, maybe a few days. And how spectacular would the results be? Sarah grinned, finally seeing where the Queen was going with this. Spectacular enough that it would be impossible to claim they were failures or accidents. Why? Because the Council vote on humanity's expulsion is scheduled for 6 days from now. If you can solve multiple impossible galactic problems in a way that clearly demonstrates sabotage has been the only thing preventing solutions, it will not only save humanity's membership, but also expose Director Morvain's conspiracy. That's a pretty big gamble, boss. If I can't pull this off, humanity gets kicked out of the galaxy. Queen Zirakai's pattern shifted to warm, confident colors. Captain Chen, in the past 3 weeks, you've identified solutions to problems that have stumped the galaxy's best minds for decades or centuries. The only reason those solutions haven't been implemented is because someone has been actively preventing them. Given proper resources and protection, I have complete confidence in your ability to succeed.
Sarah felt the familiar thrill of a seemingly impossible challenge.
What kind of resources are we talking about? My personal fleet, my best scientists, and my authority to override any administrative delays or bureaucratic obstacles. And protection from interference? I'll be personally overseeing every operation. Anyone who wants to sabotage your work will have to go through me first. Sarah extended her hand to the Queen. In that case, boss, let's save humanity and expose a galactic conspiracy. Should be fun. As they shook hands, Queen Zirakai smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived. Captain Chen, I suspect that Director Morvain has seriously underestimated both human ingenuity and Zephyrian stubbornness. He's about to discover why that was a mistake. Sarah couldn't help but grin back. Boss, I think he's about to learn that there's nothing more dangerous than a human with a deadline and proper backup. The next few days, she realized, were going to determine not just her own future, but the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy. No pressure at all. Time to get to work. With only 5 days remaining before the Council vote that would determine humanity's fate, Sarah found herself coordinating the most complex multi-system operation in her life. Queen Zirakai had kept her promise about resources. Sarah now had access to 3 full Zephyrian research fleets, the galaxy's most advanced scientific equipment, and communication priority that overrode everything except military emergencies. She also had a target on her back that was growing more obvious by the hour. Coordinator Chen, Nexus reported, we have detected 17 separate attempts to infiltrate our communication networks in the past 6 hours. All attempts trace back to systems controlled by the Galactic Commerce Regulation Authority. Director Morvain is getting desperate, Sarah said, reviewing the tactical displays that now dominated her enlarged workspace. Which means we're on the right track. How are our operations progressing? The Tau Ceti Geological Survey has penetrated the ice barrier and discovered what appears to be a massive underground crystalline formation that's been releasing harmonic interference since the meteor impact. Chief Scientist Rilnath reports that the formation appears to be some kind of natural resonance amplifier that was disrupted by the surface impact. Sarah nodded. So the plague is actually harmonic interference from their planet's own geology. Can they neutralize it? They believe so, by either retuning the formation to its original frequency or creating harmonic dampers to contain the interference. Excellent. What about the vegan situation? Admiral Kestel has successfully identified 3 GCRA operatives within his command structure who were providing information to the pirates. More significantly, he's discovered that the pirates are actually GCRA enforcement ships using illegal cloaking technology to artificially disrupt trade routes. So, Director Morvain has been creating the very piracy problem he's been claiming to help solve, Sarah said with satisfaction. That's going to be hard to explain to the Council. Any progress on the hegemony colonization issue?
The xenobiology team has made remarkable progress.
Kepler 442c is indeed inhabited by a planetary-scale intelligence that has been defending itself from what it perceived as an invasion. The hegemony scientists have established basic communication using harmonic patterns similar to those used by the planet's root networks. Sarah paused in her review of the status reports. Wait, did you say harmonic patterns similar to the Tau Ceti situation? Affirmative. Both planets appear to use crystalline formations for large-scale harmonic communication. The phenomenon may be more widespread than initially suspected. Nexus, cross-reference all the unsolved problems Director Morvain has been involved with over the past century. Look specifically for situations that might involve harmonic, telepathic, or hive-mind communication disruptions. Processing? I have found 47 cases where GCRA involvement coincided with communication-related problems across multiple species. The pattern suggests systematic interference with natural communication methods. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together. He's not just maintaining artificial scarcity for profit. He's been systematically disrupting the galaxy's ability to communicate and coordinate effectively. That would make every species more dependent on his regulatory systems and less likely to develop independent solutions. Her communication system chimed with an urgent priority signal from Queen Zyrakai. When Sarah opened the connection, the Queen's patterns were cycling through colors that indicated extreme anger mixed with grim satisfaction. Captain Chen, we have a problem and an opportunity. Director Morvain has just filed an emergency injunction to halt all of your current operations, claiming they pose a threat to galactic security. On what grounds? Sarah demanded. He claims that your interference with established crisis management protocols could destabilize multiple systems simultaneously. He's convinced the Emergency Council that your operations should be suspended pending a full security review. Sarah felt her carefully planned timeline crashing down around her. Boss, if we stop now, we won't have time to complete the solutions before the vote. That's exactly what he wants. I know, Queen Zyrakai said with a predatory smile, which is why I've decided to ignore the injunction completely. You can do that? As sovereign ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, I have the authority to protect my allies from what I consider to be politically motivated interference. Director Morvain's injunction has no power over my ships or my resources. Sarah grinned. And since all the operations are being conducted using Zephyrian resources under your direct authority, exactly. However, this does mean that Director Morvain will likely escalate his efforts to stop us. I recommend you prepare for more director interference. What kind of direct interference? The kind that might involve military assets, the Queen said grimly. My intelligence reports suggest that GCRA enforcement ships are moving toward all of your operation sites. Officially, they're responding to the security concerns raised in the injunction. Unofficially? Unofficially, Director Morvain has decided that if he can't stop you legally, he'll stop you by force. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Boss, how far are you willing to go to protect these operations? Captain Chen, the evidence you've uncovered suggests that Director Morvain has been manipulating galactic civilization for centuries, causing untold suffering to maintain his own power. I consider that a threat to the stability of the galaxy itself. That sounds like you're willing to go pretty far. Queen Zyrakai's patterns shifted to the dangerous reds and golds that Sarah had learned to associate with the Queen's more intimidating moments. If Director Morvain wants to use force to maintain his conspiracy, he'll discover that the Zephyrian Empire takes a very dim view of such tactics. After the communication closed, Sarah turned to Nexus. How long do we need to complete all operations? At current progress rates, approximately 30 to 6 hours for all solutions to be fully implemented and verified. And how long before those GCRA enforcement ships reach our operation sites? Approximately 18 hours. Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. So we need to complete everything twice as fast while under potential attack by ships that are supposed to be law enforcement vessels but are actually part of a galactic conspiracy. That is an accurate summary of the situation, Nexus confirmed helpfully. Right, Sarah said, standing up and moving to the tactical displays. In that case, we need to change our approach. Instead of trying to complete each operation independently, we need to find ways to make them support each other, explain. The Tau Ceti harmonic interference problem is similar to the communication issues affecting other species. The Kepler.442c planetary intelligence uses harmonic communication that might be compatible with Tau Ceti crystalline technology. And both situations involve natural systems that have been disrupted by external interference. Sarah began pacing as the solution took shape in her mind. What if we don't just solve these problems individually? What if we create a demonstration that shows the entire galaxy how interconnected these systems really are? You want to link the solutions together? I want to show that most of the galaxy's impossible problems are actually artificial problems created by systematic interference with natural communication and coordination systems, Sarah said excitedly. If we can establish harmonic communication between multiple affected planets simultaneously, it will prove that the technology for solving these problems has existed all along. Nexus's screen flickered with what might have been admiration. That would require coordinating harmonic frequencies across multiple star systems in real time, which is exactly the kind of impossible challenge that everyone says can't be done, Sarah pointed out. The perfect way to demonstrate that human problem-solving approaches work. It would also provide irrefutable evidence that Director Morvain has been preventing solutions that were readily available. Exactly. Nexus, connect me to all operation sites simultaneously. We're changing the plan. Within minutes, Sarah found herself addressing a collection of holographic displays showing scientists and military personnel from across the galaxy. Chief Scientist Rillanaith's crystalline form sparkled with curiosity. Admiral Kestel's large eyes were focused intently on her, and the Hegemony Xenobiology team looked both excited and nervous. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other classifications, Sarah began, we have a new objective. Instead of solving our individual problems separately, we're going to solve them all at once by demonstrating that they're actually part of the same system-wide issue. Coordinator Chen, Chief Scientist Rilmath chimed, our geological surveys have revealed that the harmonic interference affecting our people is actually part of a much larger network of crystalline formations throughout our system. The formations appear to be natural communication relays. Perfect, Sarah said. What about you, Admiral Kestel? Any updates on the GCRA connection to your piracy problem? We have confirmed that the pirates are using GCRA enforcement vessels with illegal modifications, Admiral Kestel reported. More disturbing, we have discovered that similar operations have been conducted in at least 12 other systems, all following the same pattern of creating artificial trade disruptions. And the Hegemony team? Vexnon of the Hegemony Xenobiology team activated his display. The planetary intelligence on Kepler 442c has been extremely cooperative once we established communication. It is revealed that similar planetary intelligences exist throughout the galaxy, but their communications have been systematically disrupted over the past several centuries. Sarah felt the familiar thrill of a pattern emerging. So we have natural harmonic communication networks that have been interfered with, artificial trade disruptions that prevent natural cooperation, and planetary intelligences that have been isolated from each other. All of which would benefit Director Morvain by making every species more dependent on his regulatory systems. Coordinator, Dr. Vexnon said cautiously, The planetary intelligence has made a disturbing claim. It says that the disruptions to interplanetary communication have been preventing the galaxy from developing natural solutions to problems that should have been resolved centuries ago. What kind of natural solutions? According to the intelligence, many of the galaxy's persistent problems, resource shortages, territorial conflicts, technological stagnation, could be resolved if the natural communication networks were restored and different species could coordinate their capabilities effectively. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the full scope of what they were uncovering. So Director Morvain hasn't just been maintaining artificial scarcity. He's been preventing the galaxy from evolving into a truly cooperative civilization. That appears to be correct, Chief Scientist Rilnath confirmed. Our harmonic analysis suggests that the interference patterns we've detected are not natural phenomena, but artificially generated disruptions. In that case, Sarah said with determination, we're going to give the galaxy the biggest demonstration of cooperative problem-solving it's ever seen. Here's what we're going to do. As she outlined her plan for linking all their operations into a single coordinated solution that would restore communication between multiple worlds simultaneously, Sarah couldn't help but think that Director Morvain had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated what could be accomplished when different species actually worked together instead of competing for artificial resources. He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Nexus, she said as the planning session concluded. How long until those GCRA enforcement ships arrive? 16 hours and counting. Then we'd better get started. Time to show the galaxy what humans call a miracle. The final 12 hours before the council vote became what Sarah would later describe as the most insane deadline I've ever faced, and I once had to prevent 2 asteroids from colliding while evacuating a mining station. Standing in the command center of Queen Zyrakai's flagship, surrounded by displays showing real-time data from 6 different star systems, Sarah watched as her carefully coordinated plan began to come together. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to save humanity's place in the galaxy by proving that cooperation worked better than competition. Coordinator Chen, Nexus reported, all harmonic frequencies are synchronized and ready for activation. However, GCARA enforcement ships have arrived at all operation sites and are demanding immediate cessation of activities. And our responses? Admiral Kestel reports that his fleet is standing by to protect the vegan operation site. Chief Scientist Rilnath has received support from the entire Tau Ceti Defense Force. The hegemony has deployed their first exploration fleet to protect the Kepler 442C operation. Queen Zyrakai, who had been monitoring communications from multiple species, turned to Sarah with an expression of grim satisfaction. It appears that Director Morvain's heavy-handed tactics have backfired. Several species that were previously neutral have decided to support our operations after seeing GCRA enforcement ships threatening scientific missions. How many ships are we talking about? Approximately 40 GCRA enforcement vessels versus nearly 100 ships from various species who are now actively protecting our operations, the Queen replied. Director Morvain seems to have miscalculated the level of support for your methods. Sarah's communication system chimed with an urgent signal from Dr. Vexanian at the Kepler 442C site. When she opened the connection, the hegemony scientist's excitement was palpable. Coordinator Chen, the planetary intelligence, has just made an extraordinary revelation. It can sense the other intelligences we're working with across the galaxy, and it wants to attempt direct communication with them through the harmonic network we're establishing. Is that possible? If we can synchronize the harmonic frequencies from all sites simultaneously, we might be able to create a galaxy-wide communication network that bypasses all existing artificial interference. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Dr. Vexanon, what would be the practical effects of establishing such a network? According to the planetary intelligence, it would allow instant communication between any worlds with compatible crystalline formations, eliminate the need for many of the trade regulation systems that create artificial scarcity, and enable natural resource sharing that could solve most current shortage problems. Sarah looked at Queen Zirakai. Boss, I think we're about to do more than just save humanity's membership. We're about to revolutionize how the galaxy operates." "I was hoping you'd say that," the Queen replied with a predatory smile. "Director Morvain has just demanded that I order you to cease all operations immediately or face charges of sedition against Galactic Order." "And your response?" "I told him that if he considers natural cooperation and communication to be sedition, then perhaps Galactic Order needs to be changed." Before Sarah could respond, her displays erupted with urgent alerts from all operation sites. Admiral Kestel appeared in emergency communication mode, his large eyes wide with alarm. "Coordinator Chen, GCCRA enforcement ships have begun actively jamming our harmonic frequencies. They're using some kind of interference technology to disrupt the network connections. Are they succeeding? Partially. We're maintaining local connections, but the intersystem links are being degraded." Sarah felt a moment of despair as her carefully orchestrated plan began to fall apart. Then, Chief Scientist Rilnath's voice cut through the communication chatter. "Coordinator Chen, the crystalline formations on Tau Ceti IV are responding to the interference by amplifying their output. The harmonic network is becoming more powerful, not weaker." "Doctor," Vexon's excited voice joined the conversation. "The planetary intelligence reports that the interference is actually helping to establish stronger connections by forcing the harmonic frequencies to synchronize more precisely." Sarah stared at the displays as data flowed in from all sites. The GCRA interference intended to disrupt their network was actually causing the natural communication systems to adapt and strengthen. It was like watching the galaxy's natural immune system respond to an infection. "Nexus," she said slowly, "are you seeing what I'm seeing?" "Affirmative. The artificial interference is triggering a cascade effect throughout the natural harmonic networks. Systems that have been dormant for centuries are coming online in response to the disruption attempts." "How many systems?" "Current count, 47 worlds showing spontaneous harmonic activation." The number is increasing exponentially. Queen Zirakai moved to stand beside Sarah, watching the displays with fascination. "Captain Chen, it appears that Director Morvain's interference has accomplished exactly what he was trying to prevent. He's awakened the galaxy's natural communication network." Sarah's communication system erupted with incoming signals from worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had never been part of their operations were reporting sudden activation of dormant crystalline formations, spontaneous restoration of telepathic abilities, and the emergence of previously unknown planetary intelligences. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Vexnon reported, his voice filled with awe. "The Planetary Intelligence Network is fully active for the first time in recorded history. They're sharing information about natural solutions to problems that have plagued the galaxy for millennia." "What kind of solutions?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Resource distribution networks that eliminate scarcity, natural environmental regulation systems that make terraforming unnecessary, and communication methods that make artificial trade barriers impossible to maintain." Sarah looked at the tactical display showing GCRA enforcement ships still attempting to jam the harmonic frequencies. In other words, everything that would make Director Morvain's regulatory systems obsolete. Essentially, yes, Queen Zyrakai's patterns shifted to bright, satisfied colors. "Captain Chen, I believe Director Morvain is about to discover that he has been fighting a war against the galaxy's natural order, and he has just lost decisively." As if summoned by her words, Sarah's communication system chimed with an emergency priority signal. Director Morvain himself appeared in the holographic display, and Sarah could see why he had maintained power for centuries. Even in obvious distress, he projected an aura of authority and control that was genuinely intimidating. "Coordinator Chen," he said in a voice like grinding stone, "you have interfered with systems that maintain galactic stability. The consequences of your actions could destabilize civilization itself." "Director Morvain," Sarah replied calmly, "I've helped restore natural communication networks that you've been artificially suppressing for centuries. The only thing being destabilized is your artificial control over galactic commerce. You have no understanding of the complexities involved in maintaining order among hundreds of different species," Director Morvain said, his composure beginning to crack. Without proper regulation, chaos will consume the galaxy. Without artificial interference, the galaxy will govern itself naturally, Sarah corrected. Which is exactly what's happening right now. The GCRA has maintained peace and stability for over 3 millennia. You would destroy that for the sake of your primitive human ideals? I would restore the galaxy's natural ability to communicate and cooperate, Sarah said firmly. Which, incidentally, makes most of your regulatory systems unnecessary. Before Director Morvain could respond, Queen Zyrakai stepped into the communication range. Her presence seemed to fill the display, and her patterns were cycling through colors that clearly indicated extreme displeasure. Director Morvain, she said in a voice that could freeze plasma, you have used your position to maintain artificial scarcity, prevent natural solutions to galactic problems, and interfere with the sovereignty of multiple species. Your actions constitute a conspiracy against galactic civilization itself. Your Majesty, Director Morvain said, attempting to regain his composure, surely you understand the importance of maintaining established order. I understand. The Queen interrupted that you have been exposed as the architect of the very problems you claim to solve. The evidence is overwhelming, Director. Your enforcement ships are currently jamming natural communication networks that could eliminate most of the galaxy's persistent problems. Director Morvain's holographic image flickered slightly, suggesting interference with his communication systems. The harmonic networks pose an unknown risk to established systems. The only risk they pose is to your artificial control over galactic commerce, Sarah interjected. Director, it's over. The natural networks are already sharing solutions to problems that your systems have maintained for centuries. The galaxy doesn't need artificial regulation when it can coordinate naturally. The holographic display suddenly erupted with multiple incoming signals. Representatives from dozens of species were requesting communication with Sarah, all reporting similar phenomena.